The year is 1470. The bell of St. Verena Monastery has just rung for the last time, and history has been muted. The valley of Thessaly glows red, not with sunrise, but with the colour of an empire that devours memory. The Ottomans. 23 nuns kneel, lips whispering prayers that taste like ash. Outside, steel and fire pour down. Beyond the stone walls, the horizon burns red. It is not dawn. It is the colour of an empire that makes a habit of swallowing maps whole. The Ottoman army does not advance. It surges like a river of steel and flame, erasing whatever stands in its path. This is not only a conquest. It is how an empire erases people by making them forget who they are. This video pries open clerical letters, imperial decrees, and buried records to pull the voices back into the light. If you have ever wondered why some stories disappear, while others are told forever, you are in the right place. At Gunsmoke Roses, we dig through clerical correspondence, Ottoman files, and dust-covered testimonies in the Vatican archives to bring those voices back into the light. Tap like and subscribe so memory does not stand alone. The wooden door is cracking, the bell tower is about to fall, and a single choice will define a destiny. Hold on to faith or become a nameless shadow. Begin. Every view, every like, every subscription is one more voice stepping out of the dark. Mother Superior Maris grips the silver crucifix passed down through 3 generations. Her hands tremble not from fear, but from knowing exactly what is coming. They all know. What they do not know, death may yet be mercy. The next part of this story is not in any textbook you have ever studied. Now, return to the monastery. The bell is silent. The door is about to burst. To grasp what happened to them, you must understand the machine that swallowed them, a machine that not only took land, but erased the people those victims once were. Part 2. The Ottoman Empire and the Art of Erasing Memory, rewritten. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople, the brightest jewel of Christendom, fell after 53 days under a rain of cannon fire. Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in the world, was stripped of its cross in a matter of hours. When Sultan Mehmed II walked through the doors, he did not only take a city, he claimed its memory, because he grasped something deeper than any military strategy: to destroy a people, make them forget who they are. The Ottomans did not only seize territory, they conquered souls. When Mehmed looked west, where fragments of the Byzantine Empire still lay scattered, he saw something more dangerous than rebels: memory. Every church bell that still rang, every monastery that still stood, every cross that still cast a shadow on occupied ground, each one was a quiet protest that the old world was not yet dead. And every nun who still prayed in Latin was a crack in the dream of dominion. So the Sultan made a decision. If they would not convert, they would disappear. Not by massacre, because blood makes martyrs, and martyrs feed resistance. No, they would be erased. No song, no legend, no memory allowed to survive. By 1470, that plan had spread across the empire. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian houses across the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. Some were burned, others were reformed or left to rot, but the process was the same. First came the offer, then came the silence. St. Verena Monastery, isolated on a Thessaly mountainside, was about to become the next test case. The women there did not know they were only a footnote on a conquest map. They were not warriors. They prayed, tended the sick, taught children, and grew healing herbs. Their only weapon was the rosary. Their only armour was faith. Sister Maris had served as Mother Superior for 12 years. Sister Helena, only 19, was the youngest, her hands still calloused from farm work. And Sister Dorothea, 70, had outlived 2 kings and more wars than anyone could count. None of them imagined they would face an army. But fate was knocking. And if you want the lesson our ancestors once died to leave us, here it is. The most dangerous stance before power is not rebellion. It is refusing to forget who you are. Now, watch faith meet an empire. Part 3. Cannon, Fire and Pages in a Ledger, rewritten. Before sunrise, the first blast tore the valley open. The cannonball did not strike the chapel, but the bell tower. Stone erupted, iron shattered, and the bell that had rung for more than a century snapped in 2 while it still swung. Bits of bronze rained into the garden where the nuns had once grown herbs for healing. Hands that had nurtured life now did nothing but cover ears, shaking. Sister Maris did not scream. She stood tall, raised the crucifix high, and began to sing, Kyrie eleison Lord, have mercy. 1 voice, then 2, then all. 23 thin voices rose against the thunder of the guns. But empires do not listen to sacred music. By noon, the monastery gate collapsed. Ottoman soldiers poured in, not with drawn swords, but with pens, ink, and ledgers. They did not see the nuns as human beings, but as assets to be inventoried. A translator, Greek by birth, read the decree with a trembling voice. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all inhabitants of newly annexed lands belong to the empire. Those who convert will be protected. Those who refuse will bear the consequences of rebellion. Sister Maris stepped forward. Her face was calm, her eyes ablaze. She answered in Greek, loud enough for all to hear. Tell your king that we have already given our lives to another king. We have nothing left to surrender. General Hassan Pasha, commander of the Thessaly campaign, did not grow angry. He only smiled, a smile colder than steel, because he understood what they had not yet realized. The Ottomans had mastered the art of breaking people without killing them. That night, the nuns were locked in the chapel. No water, no food, only darkness and laughter from the courtyard. The 2 youngest began to cry, but Sister Helena softly recited the Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Then another psalm, and another. The crying stopped. The Ottomans had misjudged them. These women had trained for pain all their lives, fasting, praying, night watches in the cold, obedience to something higher than themselves. What soldiers called torture was, for them, another day in the rule of life. Hassan Pasha watched in silence. He had once written to the Sultan, "Faith is like a candle. It burns brightest just before it dies." Now he would test how long that candle could burn. Part 4. The Trial of Faith. Hunger, Temptation, and the Chosen Road, rewritten. On the 2nd day, the door opened. A servant entered carrying bread and water, real food, real water. He set the tray down without a word and left. The nuns stared at it. Their throats were dry, their lips split and bleeding. For a moment, the younger women looked to Mother Superior Maris, as if waiting for a blessing that would let them live. Sister Dorothea, the eldest, whispered, "That is not mercy. That is a snare." Maris nodded, her voice low but final. "Then we will eat by faith, not by bread." No one touched the food. By the 3rd day, their hands shook, their lips were torn, but not one of them fell. Outside, Hassan Pasha stood in the yard, staring at the chapel door still closed. Admiration flickered across his face and vanished, replaced by the cold of a man running an experiment on belief. On the 3rd day, the door opened again. Not the servant, Hassan himself. He entered with the silent translator trailing him like a shadow. His voice was deep and calm, the tone of a man convinced of his own rightness. You are not criminals, not enemies, only mistaken. My merciful Sultan offers you a new chance, new names, new homes, and protection. All you must do is speak a few words. No one reacted. Hassan looked around, then continued, light as air and sharp enough to pierce any silence. Or you may come with me to Constantinople. The Sultan himself will hear your case. But the road is long, and the weak do not survive it. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Sister Maris looked around at the hollowed faces, the eyes closed in prayer. She turned to Hassan and answered slowly, "We will go." A thin smile touched his lips. "Good, at first light, we depart." That night, darkness covered the chapel. No one spoke. Then Sister Helena began to sing softly the hymn they sang every evening. One voice, then many, trembling but steady. Outside, soldiers heard. Some stopped, some bowed their heads. Years later, one of them would tell his grandson about the women who sang until they died. But history did not keep that story. Only the song remained drifting over stone walls, dissolving into the night like a message. We are still here. Part 5, The Road to Volos, Where Souls Are Tested, rewritten. They left the monastery at sunrise on the 4th day. 23 women, wrists bound with rope, walked south toward the sea. No cart, no wagon, only bare feet, red dust, and the bloodthirsty heat pouring from the Thessaly sky. The soldiers did not need to beat them. The road itself was punishment. On the 2nd day, Sister Irene, 62 years old, collapsed. Her knees had nothing left. Sister Helena and Sister Anna tried to lift her, helping her along for a few more miles. When they stopped, Irene had lost consciousness. By morning, she was gone. They buried her by the roadside, no coffin, no priest, only bleeding hands and whispered prayers. Hassan Pasha watched and wrote in his ledger, remaining 22. On the 4th day, Sister Callista halted. She sat down in the road, closed her eyes, and never opened them again. When the column reached the port of Volos, only 18 were left, bodies gaunt, eyes glowing like heated iron. No one begged, no one cursed. They were silent, not with despair, but with the calm of those who had chosen their fate. Maris still led, hands bound, back straight. On the 7th morning, Hassan summoned her to his tent. No one knows what happened there. Only a Venetian merchant, who later wrote to a friend in Dubrovnik, left this account. At first light, they brought her back. She could not walk. Her eyes were open, but her soul seemed to have drifted elsewhere. They draped her in silk and paraded her through the camp like a convert. But I saw her lips move. She was still praying without sound. The Ottomans did not need to kill her. They wanted to turn her into a shadow, a living body with no spirit left, a sign that resistance was useless. Maris went with them to the shore, but she never spoke again. The young Helena wept to see her teacher silent. The older nuns could only pray. At the harbour, they were forced onto a war galley, not a passenger ship, but a slave vessel. A cargo entry in the Topkapi archives reads, "Religious prisoners, female, number 18. Destination, Imperial Palace. Purpose, service in the inner court and conversion." The word service, here, in the language of empire, carries 100 things that cannot be said. 12 days at sea. Storms screamed. Waves broke. Salt burned cracked lips. The nuns wretched, exhausted, and still they prayed. Each night, Helena whispered the psalms, her voice so faint the sea almost swallowed it. Even so, other captives, Greek, Serbian, Italian, heard. One began to pray with her, then more and more. For a moment, the ship seemed to fall silent. When the skyline of Constantinople appeared domes, minarets, light kindling on the water, no one spoke a word. That city had once been the centre of their faith. Now it would be their prison. Part 6. Constantinople. A chapel in the dark, rewritten. From the docks, the nuns were driven through the narrow streets of Constantinople, where the cries of merchants mixed with the snap of whips on slaves' backs. Passers-by stared. Some laughed, some lowered their heads and secretly made the sign of the cross as the women passed. They went by ancient walls, by marble gardens, by the public grounds of the Sultan, until the shadow of Hagia Sophia fell across the street. The church that had been the symbol of faith was now a mosque. The call to prayer rose from the minarets, drowning even the wind. One nun murmured, "We are home, but the home no longer knows us." None of them was led into the splendid palaces that travellers marvel at today. They were taken downward deeper, darker, along spiralling stone steps, cold and wet. Beneath Topkapi Palace, a place not on the maps, lies a labyrinth of vaults, storehouses, slave quarters, old tunnels running through stone like hidden veins. At the very end of that maze sat a chamber sealed for centuries. In 2011, when archaeologists broke through a false wall, they fell into stunned silence. On the stone were dozens of tiny crosses, scratched with fingernails and pottery shards. Beneath them, a line in Latin, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. There, those forgotten women lived, prayed, and carved their souls back into the stone. By day, they scrubbed floors, washed clothes, and tended fires for a palace they would never enter. By night, when the court slept, they gathered in the small room, lit candles from wax stolen in the kitchens, and sang hymns almost without sound. No priest, no altar, only memory. They recited the psalms from memory, stitching them together with breath, turning them into prayers that kept them alive. Sister Helena, the girl who had sung on the ship, became their voice. The archaeologists found her small mark, the shape of a bird beside 23 tally lines. Only 11 marks are complete. The rest break off, as if the hand stopped mid-stroke. They used a pottery shard for a candlestick, scraps of cloth for an altar cloth, a broken mirror shard for a crucifix. Night after night, they told each other of their old home. The morning bells, the smell of baking bread memories turned into ritual. A Venetian captive held in the palace in 1478 once wrote, "I heard strange voices beneath the harem, women singing in Latin, praying to a god who does not belong to this empire. People once dismissed it as legend, but now we know they were truly there, in the dark, carving light into stone." Part 7. The Vanished and the Song That Remains, rewritten. But the room's walls tell the rest, the part the histories would not dare to write. The crosses stop abruptly. The last half of the wall is slashed with frantic marks, deep and hurried, as if the carving hand shook with fear or was being dragged away. And then perfect silence. An Ottoman record from 1482 mentions a purge in the palace under a new sultan. Many servants, no longer useful or showing signs of defiance, were handled, one word, with no names, no descriptions, no graves. After that, the nuns of St. Verena vanish from every record. 18 women who had walked through hunger across the sea in chains, who carved prayers into stone, evaporated from history. But the room remained. In 1712, a French diplomat wrote in his journal, "Servants in the imperial household say that on certain nights the air in the lower levels grows cold, and if one listens very carefully, one can hear women's voices whispering in Latin." He dismissed it as superstition. But stone does not lie. When archaeologists opened the chamber in 2011, they found wax traces from candles, not the Ottoman type. They were herb-blended candles, the kind that only nuns made. This means they kept vigil for a long time, perhaps months, even years after being imprisoned beneath the palace. The final mark is Helena's small bird, beside a faint Greek line nearly invisible. We endure. They did more than endure. They left what the empire could not erase. A room full of crosses, a prayer carved into stone, proof that faith can survive where everything else breaks apart. The Ottoman Empire lived on for 4 more centuries. But when the palace finally turned into a museum, 4 Latin words still echoed. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Part 8, The Last Message. When memory becomes resistance, rewritten. Why does this story still need telling after half a millennium? Because it is not only about religion, it is about the power of memory against a power that would erase the human person. The Ottoman Empire once ruled 3 continents, redrawing maps, changing languages, even remaking belief. It turned the greatest church in the world into a mosque, conquered from Vienna to the Arabian deserts, but it could not erase 18 women who used their fingernails to scratch prayers into stone. Consider that. An empire with cannons, treasure, and armies against people armed only with faith and will. And in the end, it was those seemingly weak ones who won, not in any way the empire would recognize as victory, but in the way that memory understands it. They did not win back their monastery. They did not persuade their captors. They did not live to see freedom, but they left a trace. History is written by the victors, but memory always belongs to the survivors. Centuries later, when archaeologists found the hidden room beneath Topkapi, they stood before the deep-cut crosses and asked each other, how long did they pray? The candle wax, the depth of the carvings, everything answers. Many years. They lived, prayed, and believed in absolute darkness, knowing no one might ever hear them. That is not only faith, that is the most primal form of human resistance. The empire has fallen. The sultans are dust. The palace is now a museum where tourists take photos, unaware that beneath their feet the marks of fingernails still score the walls. But the crosses remain, along with the Latin whisper, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. The nuns of St. Verena were destined to vanish. Yet they are still here, in those etchings, in the story you have just heard. Because you remembered them, because you did not let silence have the last word. A story that does not end in victory, but in memory, and memory is how human beings fight oblivion. If you believe buried stories still deserve to be told, please like, subscribe, and share, so together we can raise the voices that were once sealed in the dark.